Good.
Hey, so happy to have you on. So who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So my name's Annie Greene, and I am the lead scientific technical writer in the discovery department at Novavax.
Very cool. And talk to me a little bit about what Novavax is so people have some background.
Sure. So Novavax is a relatively small vaccine company. We're working right now on getting our COVID vaccine approved in the US, and it's gotten approved a few places globally. That's the main product right now. They also have a couple other respiratory disease vaccines in their pipeline.
And I'm sure you've been on a pretty interesting journey in order to be working at this company in the role that you do. Talk to us about how you broke into technical writing and into this role specifically eventually.
Sure. So basically, in pharmaceutical technical writing, there's kind of two different, knowledge bases and skill sets that you need. And so I had kind of been working on those for several years before I landed this job at Novavax. So as far as the science side of things, I started out by getting a bachelor's in biology, which is a prerequisite for a lot of jobs in the pharmaceutical industry, in writing specifically too. So I got my formal education in science, undergraduate, did some graduate work as well. Worked in some research labs, also a great thing to have in your pocket if you're trying to get into pharmaceutical technical writing. So that's how kind of I got my science background. And as well as there's, the writing component of being a technical writer, obviously. And the ways that I gained experience in the writing side of things was to work at a writing center at a university, so tutoring other students and faculty on their writing, as well as I was also a freelance scientific editor for a while, so editing scientific publications. And through kind of this combination of scientific education and research, as well as writing education and experience, that was able to help me get the qualifications in order to get this job at Novavax.
And that sort of answers my next question a little bit, but I'd love to dive into more detail, which is, how were you able to ensure career growth? And it seems like there was a number of aspects here, everything from helping other people with their work to actually doing freelance writing. Now, freelance writing for a lot of people is very much a big change in their mental shift and saying, hey, I'm going to go out and try to find clients. Talk to us about the different aspects of that journey to ensure that successful growth within what you just mentioned.
Yeah, so to me, as far as, what I always try to do for myself to ensure career growth is every couple of years, I sit down, grab a coffee on a weekend or at night and really sit down and be proactive about making short-term goals, medium-term goals, and long-term goals. And so when I was freelancing and I would sit and have these conversations with myself, I would think, I like the flexibility of freelancing and I like the flexibility of working for myself. But, there was some things that was not really doing it for me. I really wanted more stable job. I wanted, a job with benefits, kind of a more traditional job, at least for myself at this time. That's what was going to work for me. So when I sat down, I said, okay, my goals are not matching my current situations. How do I ensure I can grow to get where I want to be? Something that I think is really useful for probably any industry, not just technical writing, but I really recommend to people as far as being proactive is looking on LinkedIn, looking on Glassdoor, looking at job postings and see what sounds really interesting to you. And so that's what I did. I went on and I was like, wow, being an official science writer at a pharma company that's going to, help communicate the science so they can get these products into market, it seemed really exciting to me. And so what I did was I looked at the job requirements for those roles. And what I did was like, okay, I have the education background. Okay, I have this, maybe I meet this requirement, but I don't have experience in this software. So how can I get experience in this software? There's ways that you can be proactive about making sure that when you go to apply for your dream job, or at least a job that interests you, that you can make sure that you have all the qualifications and that you feel confident in those qualifications and you can exude that confidence during your interview to make sure that you can have a successful interview.
Yeah, that's very true. I think there's a lot of good points that you mentioned, specifically looking at job descriptions and sort of working your way backwards from there. I feel like a lot of people don't do that. It also gives you a sense of, do they even know what they're hiring for? Uh,
Yeah.
which is, I think definitely is something when it comes to the technical writing role. Not every company realizes that they need a technical writer too. Um, so one of the things that this is going to lead us into is the skill section, which is, there's a number of skills that you need to succeed on the job. And you just mentioned how communication is a big one when helping you understand how to get the job. And there's also a lot of communication elements within technical writing and other elements with skills. So if you could dive into that, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, communication is definitely a huge skill that you need to be a technical writer. Especially, if you're gonna have your job title have the word writer in it, if you're a communicator by trade, you have to be a good communicator in a lot of aspects, right? And so I think that it's really important to not only be able to be a good technical writer, put out good technical documents and communicate in that way. But I think if you're going to work at a company, or even if you're working independently, because you still have to, rely on people in some way to communicate with others to get your work out there. I think it's so important to, in the same way that when we write a document or write, make a PowerPoint presentation or whatever your actual document is that you're writing, you have to think of your audience. And I think that if you really take that into all aspects of your career, all aspects of the way they communicate on the job, it's really only ever going to serve you so well. So for example, if I'm sending an email to a colleague and I'm asking them to review a report of mine, I really think of, okay, how is this person going to receive this email? What questions might they have? And I can preempt those questions and say, here, I'm sending you this report and I am requesting you to review it by this day because that's going to help me meet this timeline. And I appreciate it. Those types of things, instead of me just emailing the report and then being like, okay, well, when do you need it? And what is this for? And, it just gives people context, help trying to preempt their questions by, thinking of your audience in all aspects of your career. So communication, definitely number one important skill set for a technical writer. And it serves you in your personal life as well, of course. Another skill that's important, I think, is time management. I kind of get a lot of emails from different people asking for different things on different deadlines. And so it can kind of get overwhelming if you're not careful. Okay, I get this email, this one's urgent, but that one's not urgent. So what should I do first? And really prioritize, okay, I get these different requests. How am I going to handle them? Can I handle them? And if I can't handle them, who do I communicate that to? So, time management is super important. A lot of times documents are needed on deadlines, right? So of course, in order to meet those deadlines and kind of keep everyone happy, definitely need to be able to manage your time well. Another important skill that I think, again, it's kind of important for probably any career path in that, when you enter as an entry-level technical writer, a lot of times as you make your way up within a company or within the industry, you end up also managing other writers. And that was the case for myself. So I entered as a technical writer and now I'm managing a team. And so that's another important skill set that if you already have those skills of managing others, great. If not, you can learn. But that's another skill set that I think serves a lot of people well, again, not just in technical writing, but in probably almost any field.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think there are some people who are meant to just stay in the technical writing role rather than ever become managers and manage technical writers, similar to a lot of other positions. So you have to identify those personality types.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I was hiring for my team, there were some people that were applying for, almost entry-level technical writer position that they used to, I was looking at their resume. I'm like, oh, wow, you used to manage a team of 8 people. Why are you applying now for this actual technical writing role? And they were like, you know what, managing is not for me. I want to actually do writing. So yeah, it takes all kinds of people on the team.
Yeah, very interesting. And then, one of the big things you talked about was time management and communication. And I'm sure you use a lot of tools to probably help you with time management and to streamline your workflow. Can you talk to us about some of your favorite tools?
Sure. So my absolute favorite tool for writing and also having people review the reports that I write are cloud-based document creation and editing tools. And that just streamlines the process so much. So, instead of me writing up a Word document and emailing it to 5 people and getting 5 Word documents back that I then have to kind of, incorporate all the different comments, if I can create a document in a cloud-based system, send that link out to people, And then, everyone's working on the same document at the same time. It makes it so much more convenient. Everyone can see other people's edits. Someone can tag me in the document. I get an email right away and I attend to it right away. It's so much more efficient. It saves so much time in the reviewing process. Huge fan of cloud-based editing tools. My company provides a Microsoft Office set of tools. So we work in, it's basically Microsoft Word online. So it'd be a SharePoint or OneDrive. If you're working independently or if your company doesn't offer the Microsoft Office suite, Google Docs is another great way. It just has streamlined so much, the review process, the writing process, because it's all very collaborative. So that's as far as software. That's, I think, my favorite tool for being efficient and communicating well. And as far as hardware, maybe this is kind of a little bit tangential, but at least for me, for streamlining my own processes for writing, I really benefit from having a double monitor setup. So to have as much space as possible on my desktop when I'm looking at different things. So when I'm writing a report, let's say I will have, have my actual report, my actual document that I'm writing. I will have maybe a data file over here, maybe another data file over here, and looking at a table over here. If I have to minimize and maximize windows all the time, I just get lost, I get distracted, it doesn't work for me. So I think it's really worth investing in a double monitor if you really want to streamline your focus and just kind of be able to look at many different things at the same time. That's also a big game changer as far as increasing productivity and streamlining the writing process.
Very cool. And, one of the things you had mentioned was this workflow with other writers and being able to edit each other's work. One of the things that comes up in the pharmaceutical industry a lot, at least from talking with writers, is the process of going through verification and making sure that material is up to date. Anytime I think you get into industry that's a bit more stringent, to say the least, on just not having anything that's out of place, you're going to have probably a different type of cycle that you go through in editing. Can you talk to us of what that verification process looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's definitely these reports get looked at with eagle eyes from regulatory agencies. So definitely want to make sure it matches the raw data and everything checks out. And so at least for my process, how that works is, if you kind of think about the big picture of how it happens. So I work in the preclinical department. So scientists will generate data in the lab. They'll do some animal experiments or, test tube experiments. They get some raw data readouts from that. Someone else analyzes the data. Maybe they make some, preliminary figures and tables or things like that. And then it comes to me. And so I will, make those figures more pretty, do a little bit more analysis, make some more tables, write up some methods and results, and I have my first draft of the report. And the way that I verify that I have everything right and that every data point is correct is that, first of all, I cross-check it with what I received, make sure I wrote down everything correctly. And then I send that report all the way back to the scientists who generated the data. And I say, hey, can you check all the data that you generated? Make sure that I captured it correctly. Make sure I'm capturing your methods correctly. And sometimes they will say, yep, looks good. Other times they're like, oh, actually, I reran this experiment and got a different number here, so let me fix it. Or, oh, no, actually, we're using a different antibody now, so let me fix it. And so that's how I really ensure that, starting from the get-go, that we're working with the most accurate data in my report. So that's kind of how the verification process works. And then after, I have that draft that I'm sure the data is all correct, I also then send off the report to other high-level people, and they have kind of a different perspective on what the report is for, who is it going to, what higher-level company objectives did this study try to meet, and let's make sure that those are captured in the report. So this report gets seen by so many different people, so many different eyes, and that's why those cloud-based tools are so useful. That's why it's so useful to be efficient in the review process, because I can't be dealing with 10 different Word files. It's a lot. So yeah, that's how I make sure everything is verified and everything is in the right place with all the stakeholders having their input.
Yeah, it's definitely a very stringent process, to say the least. One of the things that I really want to talk about, and you had mentioned this earlier, is this idea of going and finding a technical writing job that you enjoy. Now, I was actually talking to someone the other day who has a degree in biology and is trying to step into technical writing. So it reminded me when you were explaining your background of my conversation with her and trying to guide her and not really knowing what to say. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to send her this interview now. And people are trying to find alignment, and it's very, very difficult. So what would be your, best advice here for them to find alignment, to find a job that they enjoy here, because as you know, and I know, technical writing crosses pretty much every industry, and there's a lot of room.
Yeah, I mean, at least I can speak within the kind of scientific pharmaceutical realm. I think it really comes down to knowing yourself and knowing your priorities. And so, again, kind of sitting down with yourself in a quiet place, doing some brainstorming, having a coffee, really thinking about what are my priorities and what motivates me. That's going to help you find a job that you enjoy. So, for example, let's say that if you have a personal connection to someone who has a certain medical condition and you're really passionate about communicating about a specific medical condition, you can go ahead and look for jobs that say, if you're really interested in communicating about diabetes, look for jobs that relate to, diabetes institutions or diabetes research labs, or, you can pick a disease or pick a certain, research topic and go from there if that's what you think is going to motivate you. Another thing is that, when you're trying to choose what your priorities are when you're trying to find a job, honestly, money can be a serious motivator. And money can be, there's some times in our lives where we just want a stable income. We need to support ourselves. We need to support our families. So you can also go on Glassdoor, look at different salary ranges, look at which industries maybe pay the best, or which, companies within that industry pay the best. And honestly, that can be an important criteria. Maybe don't mention that in your interviews. It's a little bit tacky, but that's a very, very legitimate, way to find a job that works for you. Another thing to think about, especially now, is what type of work setup does the job have? So if you're a person that likes to work in the office all the time, is this job have an in-person office that you can go to? If you would rather work from home all the time, is this job also going to let you do that now that people are slowly starting to come back to the office? And so, or would you prefer hybrid? Those types of kind of logistic concerns of how is the job done? That's also really important. And that can be a big factor in, are you compatible with this position? As you get maybe further along in the interview process, another way that you can check and see, is this the right job for me? Is, let's say you have an interview and it goes really well, and you're really interested in the company, but maybe you're kind of playing with a few different options. You can definitely ask HR and see if you can talk to either some other members of your team, so the people that you'd be working with, or talk to other people who are managed by your boss and ask them, what's it like to work for this person? And so in that way, kind of in a more specific way, once you're a little further along in the process, you can get an idea of, is this the actual microclimate for me? Is this the right team for me? And it could be a yes, it could be a no, but that's a big make or break in whether you're going to enjoy a job or not, is the actual people you work with day to day.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think that's one of the hardest things to gauge at the end of the day.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah. Especially, I think also it's like sometimes you don't even talk to the person who's going to be managing you. Unfortunately, right. Sometimes you don't really know, like you think the person that you're talking to will be managing you, and then somebody else who's really the stakeholder. So there's lots of those variables, and yeah, it's hard to navigate.
Yeah, you never know, but you can always ask HR. I think that's one of those things that the worst case, they tell you, no, you can't talk to them, but it's worth a ask.
Yeah, very true. I think it's a very much a better ask than what you were saying before, like asking and point out like different things around salary right away, better to ask more about team structure.
For sure. If money's your motivator, that's totally fine. Again, a lot of us enjoy our jobs, but we also, at the end of the day, we're here for the paycheck, right? So it's an important motivator, but yeah, maybe don't mention that up front.
So one of the things that I'm really excited to talk with you about is, where do you see the future of technical writing going? We have it as a whole, but also, industry specific to pharmaceuticals, and a lot of new tools have come out to help with cloud-based organization. And we're seeing, lots of different ways that people are trying to help technical writers today. And just, I think also, how they're treated within organizations and their role as being important and known. As before, it wasn't necessarily as much of a known role as it is today.
Yeah, I mean, luckily it's not my job to come up with these future forward things, because it's really hard for me to think about. It's really hard for me to envision what the future will look like. But I think that you're right. I think that you're on the right track. I would also think that technology as far as like different cloud-based tools for actually getting the writing done. That I've definitely seen like leaps and bounds in the technology and increasing our efficiency in that way from getting the actual job done. As far as other ways to like help the future of getting organized, staying organized, becoming integrated within an organization. I know there's also a lot of tools. I work a lot with the people in our, project managing department, because my report, let's say the reports that I write, they go off to the regulatory people, they go off to people writing scientific papers, they go off to a bunch of different people, and I need to know who those people are. They need to know who I am. So there's a lot of cross-functional communication that needs to happen. And myself as the technical writer don't always know who that is. So, I think there's a lot of tools that project managers can use to look at organizational charts, understand who's talking to who. I think that there's a lot of technology that they use that definitely, helps them connect me with the right people and helps them track my tasks to make sure that things are getting off to where they need to go. So yes, I think that, cloud-based tools as far as actual writing, and then also other technology tools with regards to like organization and tracking tasks and things like that. I'm sure those things are continuing to advance in the future.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I think, once you have a company with like thousands and thousands and, maybe hundreds of thousands of documents, and it's like, how do you organize all that?
It's a lot.
Yeah, I talk to people who work at some pretty large companies, and sometimes they just look at me and they're like, honestly, we haven't figured it out. There's not a way yet, it's a disaster over here. I'm just like, oh gosh, it scares me. But yeah, so I feel like there's a lot happening, and people are trying to figure out this big problem. I know like Madcap is a software in the space that I came across, and like Almanac is another one. So I know people are trying to do things in the space, but it's a journey.
For sure.
So one of the things that I want to talk to you about is particularly like challenges in the workplace when it comes to someone who wants to step into the role of a pharmaceutical writer, because many of the people watching this video today are interested in stepping into that role. And I'm sure they're wondering like, what am I going to come across that's going to possibly bring a challenge to me that I have to overcome to really make this job happen?
Yeah, I think, probably not specific to the pharmaceutical industry, but probably any technical writing job where you have multiple people giving you input. One hurdle, I think one struggle can be managing feedback from different people, especially when that feedback conflicts each other. Let's say you have a few people over you and they both, they disagree on what belongs in this section, or what statistical analysis do we do over here. And yourself as the author of the report, as the real owner of the report, you have to not, it's when there's different advice coming from above, you have to be the ones to manage that and make a decision, or at least help other people make the decision, and kind of take a stance and say, thank you for your input, I actually think it needs to be this way, and this is why. So I think managing conflicting input can be tough, and what I've done a few times is, if I get conflicting input and I think like, oh, I see where this person is coming from, but I kind of disagree. So I can't just say, I disagree, I'm not taking your feedback, right? This is like my boss. I can't just totally ignore their feedback, right? And obviously, especially if they have a lot more years of experience than I do, their feedback is coming from, a lot of years of knowledge that I also have to respect and understand. And so, I think it takes sometimes doing your own research, forming an opinion that's based on, facts that you can find online. There's a lot of different ways that you can mitigate conflicting feedback. And sometimes it just comes down to, explaining, hey, I saw that you, put this input. Thank you so much. But, actually, I think it should be done this other way. And a lot of times if you do that, if you approach that, in a friendly way and in a fact-based way, I think people tend to take that really well. Or alternatively, they will say, thank you, very cute, but we're going to do it this way. And you also have to know when to kind of defer to them too. So kind of managing conflicting input can be kind of tough. Specific to the pharmaceutical industry, I think that one hurdle is it can be pretty demanding. So sometimes there's just a lot of work to do. And especially if there's a big deadline coming up, there's just a lot going on. And you have to, again, that's when those like time management skills really become important. And that's when, really learning how to, in what environment do I work best so I can focus becomes really important. For example, in the pharmaceutical industry, if your company is applying for regulatory approval somewhere and this application is due on a certain day and you need to have all of these reports done by a certain day. You can do your best to manage that workload throughout the year, or as far as in the future as you have visibility. But at a certain point, sometimes you're just going to have really busy days, really busy weeks, really busy months. And so I think that that's one other struggle that or hurdle, I guess, that you can encounter in this industry.
I think it's really hard to scope documentation in terms of the amount of work that's going to go into it, because there is a lot of collaboration involved, and there's a lot of waiting to hear back from other people and those different things.
Yeah, especially if sometimes in my company, sometimes we contract out studies to different other research organizations, and so yeah, it's not like I can email my coworker and say, hey, this document is late. It's this external entity that maybe is late. And so there's just, there's a lot of moving parts, and a lot of it's beyond your control. So it's a lot of moving parts to manage for sure.
So one of the things that I'd love to talk to you about is many of the people that we've seen who make the shift into technical writing, they often come from a number of common backgrounds. A lot of them have worked as English teachers. A lot of them have worked as engineers, many as process engineers. And they're trying to see whether technical writing is right for them. And for English teachers, they just want to get into a writing role. I feel like they often want a better salary, but they can still love writing. And they're like, is technical writing the right role for that? And then for a lot of engineers, they're looking to get more out of like heavy problem solving into something else that's still technical. And this is just from having lots of conversations. And what do you think are some signs that technical writing is right for you if you're looking to get into the field, and particularly pharmaceutical writing?
Yeah, I think an English teacher probably meets a lot of the criteria in some ways. Honestly, I think if you really enjoy written communication, if you enjoy communicating in that way, one little hint might be, oh, do I prefer text message over talking on the phone because I can actually think about it a little more before I communicate my thoughts? At least that's like maybe a little hint that it might be good for you. So if you enjoy written communication, I think that's definitely a great way to think, a great sign that you might be good for technical writing. Another one would be if you are really good at grammar and spelling. Honestly, if you're going to be a professional technical writer, you have to be able to put out very technically correct documents that are also written well. And so I think that grammar and spelling and real proficiency of English or whatever language you're going to be writing in is super important prerequisite for for technical writing. And honestly, I think another one is if you don't mind being in front of the computer for a lot of hours in a day, because that's what a lot of the job entails, right? So a lot of the job is sitting at the computer and cranking out writing. And my advice is get a standing desk or get some type of, way to be comfortable at the computer for many hours, get some blue blocking glasses, whatever you need to do. But I think if you can really thrive by just kind of sitting at the computer and focusing, then it could be right for you. If you really would rather be, on your feet, and if you would rather be, interacting with more people a lot, then it might be kind of tough. And so I think that, but if you enjoy kind of like, again, grabbing your coffee, sitting at the computer, getting stuff done, or maybe sitting on a yoga ball also works too. But, I think that's also an important kind of technical way to know if that job might work for you.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's very much of it comes down to like, what does it look like on a day-to-day basis, right? And I feel like not a lot of people mention that, so I appreciate that. I know we covered a lot here in this interview. Is there anything you want to leave the people watching this video with before we go?
No, I mean, again, I think just like really go on LinkedIn, really look at what's your dream job and really work to get those skills to get there. If I can mention one other little tool that I found really useful for myself as someone who sometimes has trouble staying off the phone when I'm working, when I'm, doing that focusing on the computer. I will recommend this app called Forest, and it really helps me focus. So basically, if you're trying to, let's say I'm like, okay, I don't want to look at my phone for 2 hours. I set a little timer on the app for 2 hours, and it grows a little tree for you in 2 hours. If you look at your phone, if you respond to a text message, nope, your tree is dead. And if you leave your phone alone for 2 hours, it grows your tree and you get some coins to buy different trees. It sounds silly. It kind of makes a little game out of focusing, but I find it really motivating. It's a fun way to make sure that I, leave my phone aside and focus. But no, I think we covered a lot of, really important topics of how to get into technical writing, what kind of qualifications you might need, what kind of hurdles you might experience. I think we covered everything. So yeah, thanks for those poignant questions.
Hey, well, Annie, thank you so much for being with us today and doing this interview. Really appreciate it. And we'll go ahead and rock and roll from here. And thank you everybody for watching.
Sounds good. Thank you.